Stephen Marshall will resign as the leader of the South Australian Liberals after his election defeat yesterday. Reporter Leah McLennan joins us now from Adelaide. Leah, what has the Premier said?
Well, the Premier hasn't spoken to the media this morning, not since he gave his concession speech last night, but he has released a statement basically saying as the leader, he takes responsibility for the party's loss, that he's gone to the Governor and told her that he's unable to form government, and that as soon as he can convene the party room, he will step down as leader and allow them to elect a new one. He says, though, that he will continue to serve the people of Dunstan, so no indication that he's leaving Parliament for now.
We came to government 4 years ago, an incredible situation. Since then we've had fires, floods, fruit fly, the coronavirus, bushfires. I think we leave South Australia in an immeasurably better situation than what we found 4 years ago. But I feel very grateful that we live in a democracy where everybody gets their vote. And today the people of South Australia have spoken. They've elected a new government. But it doesn't take away from the work that we have done in South Australia over the last 4 years.
Leah, was this defeat expected?
In some ways it was, in other ways it wasn't. We had seen some polls during this campaign that did show a Labor victory, but I think the Liberal Party, at least publicly, was saying that they weren't feeling that on the campaign trail, that voters weren't telling them that they were turning away in droves. But obviously on the night, that is what's happened, and perhaps the Labor victory was even greater than expected. At some stages, it was thought maybe it was going to be a minority government and the parties would have to deal with the crossbench. And while there are still a few independents there, Labor has well and truly won this in its own right.
And so a lot of promises, of course. What will a Labor government mean for South Australia?
Well, the biggest issue that Labor campaigned on, and what many are saying won them the campaign, was in the area of health. When it came to pandemic management, Labor took a fairly bipartisan approach to how that was handled in the state, but certainly as the campaign started, they really targeted things not around the pandemic, but other issues that have arisen in the health system. That's to do with things like ramping, people waiting in ambulances, waiting to get into crowded EDs, just how long it's taking for ambulances to get to people at times when they've called 000. A lot of those issues were really hammered home hard by Labor, and with the help of the unions that represent those health workers, both ambulance officers and nurses, really assisted in that campaign. So Labor has said it's made more than $3 billion worth of promises. $1 billion of those, or more than $1 billion, is in the area of health. They say they're going to add beds, they're going to add doctors, nurses, paramedics, ambulances. So they're certainly going to be held to those promises and the idea that they would be able to fix the ramping crisis within these 4 years. So that'll be the biggest one. But leader Peter Malinauskas went out and spoke to media this morning and wanted to make it clear that there were other areas that his government would be targeting.
But I said from the start that I was going to be a pro-business Labor leader. I do believe that our economy works best when we achieve the right balance between the interests of capital and labour, and only the Labor Party understands the importance of that. When you have a pro-business Labor Party, you see the interests of working people working together with the interests of business to ensure that our economy delivers for everybody, not just the few. And of course, when you combine that with thoughtful policy around key government services, particularly at a state level, education and obviously health, we can do good things to help people out. But we've also got a program and an agenda that speaks to the long-term interests of our state.
So now Peter Malinauskas' task is to set up his cabinet and get on with the business of governing after 4 years of Labor on the opposition benches. But while that's happening, the Liberal Party are going to face the difficult task of rebuilding after this defeat. Obviously, we now know that Premier Stephen Marshall will stand aside. He won't carry on as opposition leader. that leaves a fairly open field. The deputy leader appears to have lost his seat. The woman who was Deputy Premier before him is still under investigation by the Ombudsman, which is why she had stepped aside from her position. So it's a pretty open field. There are a couple of contenders, but none have put their hands up yet. So we'll have to wait and see what that party will look like in the next few days and weeks.
Leah McLennan reporting from Adelaide. Thank you.